Week 4 of the fantasy football season, and here's the top 12 defense DST units I'm ranking this week. The first one, the Green Bay Packers. So the Packers, their defense has been great so far in the early going, not giving up a lot of points, and really getting to the quarterback and keeping teams in check. So the last couple of weeks for them, Week 2 versus Chicago, 10 points allowed, 3 sacks and interception. In Week 3 at Tampa Bay, 12 points allowed, 3 sacks, 2 fumble recoveries. So right here, great matchup Week 4 versus the New England Patriots. So going to be out without Mac Jones. Their offense hasn't been that great to begin with this season here. And it's a home game in Lambeau Field. So right now, I think they're going to dial up a lot of blitz. They're going to get to Brian Hoyer, who's most likely going to be the starter. Even if they bring someone in this week like a Cam Newton or whoever, I don't think he's going to be in line to start the first game right away off the street. So right here, this Packer team got a great matchup, good defense, and this Patriot team's really reeling right now. So I can see this Packer team hold them down to mid-teens, low 20s, get a few sacks in this game and turn it over a few times as well. The next defense, the Los Angeles Rams. So the Rams hasn't been that great of a season for them so far in terms of fantasy football, but they're still going out there, and they've won the last 2 out of 3 ball games. Week 1 versus Buffalo, 30 points allowed, but 2 sacks, 2 windows, 2 fumble recoveries. Week 2 versus Atlanta, 25 points allowed, 3 sacks, 2 windows, a fumble recovery. And Week 3 at Arizona, 12 points allowed, 2 sacks in that one. So right here, Week 4 at San Francisco, I think this team to get back to its roots and start to get more turnovers and make some big-time plays. Trent Williams, left tackle for this 49er team, he's out for 6 weeks, the All-Pro. And Jimmy Garoppolo last week, he just didn't look good versus the Denver Broncos. So right here, I think they could get to Jimmy G a few times. I think they could shut down the run game, which they've done for the most part the first 3 games of the season. Buffalo, no one ran well. Week 2, Cordell Patterson didn't run well. And Week 3, Connor didn't do much in that game. So right here in Week 4 at San Francisco, I think Jeffrey Wilson, they can hold them in check and make this offense one-dimensional. Tee off this week, the next defense, number 3, the Philadelphia Eagles. So this Eagle defense, they've been playing great football in the early going, 3-0 already to start the season. And this defense is making plays, and they get into the quarterback. Last week with 9 sacks versus old Frank Carson Wentz. But right this week, this is a great matchup on paper. But this Jacksonville Jaguar team, they're not a pushover, in my opinion here. They beat the Los Angeles Chargers last week pretty easily, even though we know Herbert wasn't 100% and Keenan Allen was out. But this offense has some weapons. Trevor Lawrence looks like a different quarterback from last year to this season. And you know Doug Peterson's going to want to stick it to his former team that he led to the Super Bowl victory a few years ago. So right here, this Eagle team playing great. Last week, like I said, at the Commanders, 6 points allowed, 9 sacks, a fumble recovery in that one. But right here versus Jacksonville, I still think they can hold them to a decent amount of point mark and get a couple turnovers. But I'm not expecting a 20-plus fantasy game from the Eagles once again like they did last week. Number 4, the Denver Broncos. So the Denver Broncos, their defense has been pretty stout the first 3 weeks of the season. And right here, I know it's a tough matchup with Devontae Adams and the Vegas Raiders here, but this Bronco team's going out there, making plays and getting the job done. Week 2 versus Houston, 9 points allowed, 3 sacks in that one. Week 4 versus San Francisco, 10 points allowed, 4 sacks, an interception, 2 fumble recoveries, and a safety. And right here, Week 4 Vegas, we know Derek Carr has been a pretty good quarterback the last couple seasons, but it's a divisional game, and I think this Bronco team, they can make a few plays in this game on Derek Carr. And also, he's a quarterback that's been sacked a lot over the last few seasons. So this Bronco D-line, I think they could cause some havoc in this one. I think they can make a few plays, but I also could see the Raiders put up points in this one. But I like this Bronco with their big playability at number 4. Number 5, the Dallas Cowboys. This Cowboy D-line has been carrying them the first 3 games of the season here, and they're playing good football on defense as this Cowboy team. I know they're not getting the turnovers like they did last season, where they were amongst the league leaders in turnovers, but they're keeping teams to low scores. They're sacking the quarterback, and they're getting a couple interceptions here and there. Week 1 versus Tampa, 19 points allowed, 2 sacks and interception. Week 2 versus Cincinnati, 17 points allowed, 6 sacks. And Week 3 at the Giants, Daniel Jones, he was running for his life in that one. Pressure got to him 22 times or something in that ball game. 16 points allowed, 5 sacks, a block kick in that one. So this Cowboy team versus a weak Washington Commander offensive line, where Carson Wentz got sacked 9 times. And you know Micah Parsons, he's already one of the top defensive players and pass rushes in the league in only his second season. So right here, if him and DeMarcus Lawrence are hitting on cylinders again like they did last week here, this Cowboy team could get a lot of sacks in this ball game and hold this Commander offense down to a small point margin. Number 6, the Cleveland Browns. So this Brown team's been a weird team on defense in the early going. And now Myles Garrett, he got injured in a car accident. We don't know if he's going to miss this game or not, but I'm assuming he is. But anyway, it's a pretty decent matchup at the Atlanta Falcons. Even though this Falcon team, they got some impressive weapons. Drake London's been good. Cordell Patterson, he's been great at running back so far. And Kyle Pitts finally had a big game in last week's game. So far for this Cleveland team, they've been underachieving, but Jadeveon Clowney should be back in this ball game. And we know this Atlanta offensive line isn't all that great. So week 1 at the Panthers, 24 points allowed, 4 sacks in it. Though week 2 versus the Jets, 31 points allowed, 2 sacks, a fumble recovery. In week 3 versus the Steelers, 17 points allowed, a sack and a fumble recovery for a touchdown on laterals, though, to end the game. But points are points. I know it was at the end of the game, it was desperation by the Steelers here, but the Browns, they got that touchdown and had a decent fantasy day. So right here, week 4 at Atlanta with a good matchup and a pass rush that could get to Marcus Mariota, even though he's looked pretty efficient in the early going. I got them in number 6. Number 7, the Arizona Cardinals. So the Cardinals as a 1-week defense this week. Yeah, I like them versus a weak offense in the Carolina Panthers that really haven't done anything. DJ Moore hasn't done good. Christian McCaffrey, yes, he's looked good, but not as great as he was, obviously, with injuries, and also teams zeroing in on him and making Baker Mayfield try to beat him. So the first few weeks here for Arizona, they haven't been good at all. Week 1 versus Kansas City, 44 points allowed, fumble recovery. Week 2 with the Raiders, 23 points allowed, a sack, and a game-winning scoop and score to win that one in overtime. And week 3 versus the Rams, 20 points allowed, a sack, and a fumble recovery. So right here, we know Baker Mayfield's good for a few turnovers. And we know this Panther offense, they don't put up a lot of points on the board. So right here, I think this Cardinal team can make plays in this game. They're available right now, 97% of fantasy leagues here. And as a 1-week play this week, and number 7, I think they're a decent play. Number 8, the Buffalo Bills. So the Bills, we know, are one of the better defenses, if not the best defense in all of pro football. But it's a tough matchup versus Lamar Jackson and this Baltimore Raven team. So the first few weeks they got off to monster games was this Bill team. Week 1 at the Rams, 10 points allowed, 7 sacks, 3 intos. Week 2 versus the Tennessee Titans, 7 points allowed, 2 sacks, 2 intos, 2 fumble recoveries with a scoop and score. And week 3 at Miami, they didn't do anything really for fantasy. 21 points allowed, 2 sacks, and a safety. So right here, week 4, I could see similar type of numbers for them like we did in week 3, with maybe a few more sacks on Lamar Jackson, even though the key to keep Buffalo off the field is have the time of possession and put points on the board. And when Lamar Jackson is a running quarterback, I think Baltimore could do that, where this Buffalo team's not going to get many opportunities to get points on the board. And this Baltimore team's going to keep them off the field as much as possible. So right here, it's a tough matchup. But I know Buffalo has great playmakers. I know they got a great defensive line, especially with Von Miller added to the mix now. And I think this week they still have a top 8 performance. Number 9, the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers, they've been a disappointment since week 1 on the defensive side of things. Last week I thought they were going to have a big week versus the Cleveland Browns on Thursday Night Football, but they didn't show up. And obviously with TJ Watt out, it's been a big loss for the Steelers team. But right here in week 4, they got a plus matchup versus the New York Jets with Zach Wilson coming back, who obviously hasn't played all season, and last season didn't look good at all in his rookie year. So week 1 in Cincinnati, like I said, was the monster game. 20 points allowed, 7 sacks, 4 intos, a pick 6 by Minkah Fitzpatrick in that one, a block kick and a fumble recovery. Week 2 versus New England, in a plus matchup, you figured 17 points allowed and only an interception. And week 3, Cleveland, 23 points allowed, 2 sacks in that one. So right here, week 4 versus the Jets, you would hope this Steelers team could do something, but I'm keeping it cautious with them at number 9, because any team versus the Jets could get fantasy points. We saw Cincinnati go off last week with a big ball game, and in week 1 we saw Baltimore have a good game, and in week 2 Cleveland didn't. But this Jet team here, their offensive line's banged up. Zach Wilson's a young quarterback, first game back, and I think the Steelers could make plays, but I'm being cautious with them at number 9. Number 10, the New York Giants. So the Giants here, their defense has definitely improved this season. A bend but don't break defense, and a defense with at least some pass rushers that could get in the quarterback's face, even though last week Cooper Rush did a great job versus that defense, not getting sacked and not turning the ball over. But week 1 in Tennessee, 20 points allowed, a sack, a fumble recovery. Week 2 versus Carolina, 16 points allowed, 2 sacks, 2 fumble recoveries. And then last week versus Dallas, 23 points allowed, but as a 1 week play here versus a weak Chicago Bear offense that can't move the football besides using their running backs, David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert. Their offense is putrid. Darnell Mooney's done nothing. Justin Fields, he just looks to run every play, I believe, here. And that's been a huge problem for this Bear team. And this Giant team, they've been playing good football defensively, and it's another home game for them. So in this one, I think they have a bounce-back performance in terms of fantasy numbers. And I have them in number 10, number 11, the San Francisco 49ers to the Niners. Their defenses look pretty solid the first 3 weeks of the season here, but this is a tough matchup versus the Los Angeles Rams. This Ram team, I know it's not the greatest offenses, and their running game hasn't done much so far in the early going, but to deal with Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford, who could stretch the field, is still a pretty tough matchup. Week 1 at the Bears in that wet ball game, 19 points allowed, 2 sacks in it. Though week 2 versus Seattle, no points allowed in that one. 2 sacks, 2 interceptions, a fumble recovery. And week 3 at Denver, they held their own again. 9 points allowed and 4 sacks. So this team, they stopped the run pretty good. They get to the backfield and get to the quarterback. And in this one, I think they can make a few plays on Matthew Stafford, but I don't think it's going to be a huge fantasy day. And I got him in number 11 in the 12th and final defense. I'm ranking this week's the Indianapolis Colts. So the Colts, they bounced back last week with a great performance versus a great offense in the Kansas City Chiefs. After the first 2 weeks of the season, on paper, were weaker matchups. They didn't do anything. Week 1 at Houston, 20 points allowed, 3 sacks, a fumble recovery. Week 2 at Jacksonville, 24 points allowed in that one. And then week 3 versus Kansas City, 17 points allowed, a sack, an interception, and a fumble recovery. So right here, week 4 versus Tennessee, another home game here for the Indianapolis Colts. Ryan Tannehill, he's looked decent so far in the early going in the first 2 out of 3 ball games. But I think in this one, this defense could get to him a few times. And their main focus, though, is going to have to be stopping Derrick Henry. If they don't stop Derrick Henry, they're going to be in for a long day after we saw Henry have a breakout game in last week's game. So right here, I got the Colts in number 12 because their defense plays better at home. And you got to give them some credit for pretty much holding and limited the Kansas City Chiefs offense last week. So that's a top 12 defense DST units I'm ranking here for week 4 of the fantasy football season.